Okay. Lesson 3. I've jumped down the schedule, so I'm actually doing week 7 tonight. Demons in the Old Testament, and I want to do that because they are mentioned. Nowhere near as much as we'll find when we get to the Gospels, but I feel on reflection that it'd be better to cover them now, because that would lead into my next class, which will be at the beginning of January, week 4, God's conflict with the Old Testament angelic beings, and then we will also look at the gods, small g. Okay, so I think this is a better way to do that. Demons in the Old Testament. What do you reckon was the Israelites' view of demons? Well, the surviving writings that we have, which are not many, from Hebrew texts, because they tended not to keep them, but those that we have, and all the writings that still exist that have been found in the last, a lot of them in the last 100, 150 years, from what would have been Babylon, Sumer, Akkadian, all that area we call Iran and Iraq mainly today, and Persia. Those are quite descriptive. So we know a lot about how the nations around Israel, the Near Eastern cultures, how they viewed demons. And they were obsessed with them. There's no other word to use, really. Obsessed with demons. The Greeks, I think I may have mentioned this last time, that the ancient Greeks actually didn't see demons necessarily as bad. Sometimes they saw them as good. But that can even be the case in some of these other cultures, depending on the context of what's being talked about. It's almost like they had levels of evil, so that some demons could protect you from worse demons. That's the kind of context I'm trying to give you. The surviving writings of the Jews, though, they show some radically different views of the spirit world than the nations or the countries around them. The Old Testament doesn't seem to have any of the obsession with evil spirits that their neighbors had. These other countries, they lived in abject fear. What do I mean by that? What's it like to live in abject fear? Do you have experience of that yourself? You shouldn't have if you're in Christ.
What abject means.
What does abject mean? Constant. And it's all pervasive. It's in every area of life, because they fear that demons or spirits, especially animists fear the spirit world. Okay, and that world is all encompassing. It affects everything. Okay, it can affect where you live, it can affect your work, it can affect your family, just every part of life. And they see, yeah.
We're seeing that today.
We're seeing that more today, aren't we?
Because feng shui, you can't arrange your furniture.
Feng shui, yeah. That's Chinese sort of. Is that part of Shintoism? I think so. You might know the answer to that. Yeah, I remember when we were putting Fiona's mum's house on the market. What did that lady that came round? She walks in the house and sort of goes, "Oh wow, I sense a." Yeah. What I don't know if that's. Huh?
It's evil spirits in the house.
No, well, no. She was actually saying it in a good way, but it was definitely.
Yeah, good aura.
Yeah, something to do with Chinese thinking or whatever.
Vibes. People say today vibes. I get some.
I get the vibes.
People say vibes.
Is it Bing Shu?
That's the name for it?
feng shui.
Feng shui.
Feng shui.
I don't know.
Well,
Anyway, I'm not here to talk
if you're
about
a
Chinese
Texan,
stuff.
it's Bing Shu.
Yeah. The vibes would be if you lived in along the San Andreas, Volta,
Oh,
yeah, getting good vibes or bad
Yeah.
vibes. Anyway, so they live in fear, constant fear of demons and spirits. Hence why it's not just something Paul came across in modern day Turkey and Asia Minor, as it was called. But really, this kind of situation is apparent all the way down through history into these most ancient of cultures, the ones that go back to the 3rd century BC, the time of the flood probably. And I think there may even be some allusions to some of them in our pre-flood accounts of early Genesis. But we'll look at that in a moment. So these nations are controlled by fear. And what does fear or lack of knowledge of God lead to? What other situation?
Depravity.
Come on. Superstition. What's superstition?
It's what we have in England.
Okay. What's that then?
When I grew up, my mum used to say to me, you can't cross 2 knives.
Yeah.
If you break a mirror, you get 7 years bad luck.
Yeah, don't walk on the cracks in the pavement.
Yeah, never walk.
Don't let a black cat cross your path.
Yeah, they believed it.
They did, didn't they?
It's huge. Isn't it?
Touch wood.
Don't walk under a ladder.
Touch wood. Don't walk under. Yeah, well, no, that's common sense. Don't walk under a ladder. It's common sense. That's not
If you walk
superstition.
around it, there was
Yeah.
a ladder there, she'd go around it.
But what is superstition in this sense?
It's a devil worship in it.
It's bred by not understanding what it is you're serving. Okay? And the gods of all these nations never revealed anything about themselves. They never produced any inspired writings. So the writings that describe these gods come from where? Man. People who somehow managed to rise up and become kind of cult leaders, I guess. And they would take on a religious nomenclature like a shaman or some kind of wizard or something. Yeah. But they would be the all-knowing ones. And usually they would have a claim that they had been led in to understand secrets that weren't revealed to anybody else. So that's how they gain control. And they would create their own priesthoods and their own, sacrificial services. But for the people, and probably the priest as well, because really he knew he didn't understand his gods, what they were trying to do was appease what they didn't know. What do I mean by appease? What do we mean by that word?
Satisfy.
Sorry?
Satisfy them.
Satisfy him?
Make them leave you.
Not
alone.
really. Huh?
Make them leave you alone.
Make them leave you alone. Yeah. Try and keep them from destroying you. That's about as far as it got. Try and keep them from destroying you. Okay. Now, superstition part of this really goes in various directions. One might be, okay, the crop is blighted this year. Okay, locusts came in from nowhere and they ate all the crop. What would most of these people put that down to? Their gods are angry. Yeah, those spirits are angry. We've done something wrong. Okay. And so what would they think they needed to do? Yeah, this is just the start. This is going to get really bad. Okay, so we need to offer a sacrifice. What should we offer? What do you reckon our God would like?
Burl.
Burl?
They would love me.
We'll offer Burl.
Lord,
Why would we offer Burl?
It'd be funny.
I don't think we're taking this in the. No.
The Jews offered their children.
Yeah. Why did they do that? 2 reasons.
Well, maybe that was the most precious thing to them, and so they thought it should
Okay.
have been, and
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. I don't fully know. I don't think anyone fully knows why, but they thought it was the most precious thing. Yeah, for sure.
That would be your most precious thing, I
it
think.
should be.
I can't remember if I told you about an instance that happened, and I'm forgetting where it is right now. I think it's in 1 Kings 3, or 2 Kings 3. But Israel was attacking Moab, one of the cities in Moab, and the king was desperate to hold out. And what did he do? He offered one of his own princes, one of his own sons, to the god of Moab, which is either Chemosh or Milcom. I forget which two. One's Ammon, one, but they're essentially the same god. Okay, so he made his son go through the fire, and it actually appeased the god because they managed to turn around and get Israel to retreat from the city. So they called on these gods, and that's really next week's or next time's study. These gods with a small g, and the gods actually did something, it seems, in this war of evil, and answered him. But what a cost, hey? What a cost. The Israelites in the main, I know there's times where they will fall and whore after the nations around later on. But in their earlier history, they were not controlled by fear and superstition. And I'm persuaded the main reason is because their God revealed himself to them. He either spoke to their leaders or he used his prophets to relate to them what he wanted from them. And I think even though we haven't got written accounts all the way back to pre-flood times, I believe he revealed what he wanted from his people right back to Adam and his children. So that when they were offering sacrifices, they knew what they were to offer and the purpose of the offering. Yes? So it's clear to me that that's one of the essential differences, and that's probably why demons don't take center stage, shall we say, in the Old Testament. They're sort of on the periphery, okay, a lot of the time, but they do figure, and we're going to see some of the ways in which they show up. We will see, though, that the purpose of the demons is setting a stage for later on, okay? Because when we come to the Gospels, it's full-on war with the demons. So, first way in which we see evil spirits used in the Old Testament are the ones that are sent from the Lord. Evil spirits sent from the Lord? That sounds a bit of a contradiction in terms, doesn't it? Well, there's a number of passages where we can see this happening. Let's turn first of all to Judges chapter 9. Judges chapter 9. In the account of Abimelech, who is related to Gideon, and Jerubbaal, the son of Joash. says, I'm in 8:29, Judges 8:29. He went and lived in his own house. Now Gideon had 70 sons, his own offspring, for he had many wives. And his concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son and called his name Abimelech. And Gideon, the son of Joash, died. And so that those two names, Jerubbaal and Gideon, are synonymous. Okay. He died at a good old age and was buried at the tomb of his father. Okay. Now, as soon as Gideon died, the people of Israel turned again and whored after the Baals, the Canaanite gods, and made Baal Berith their god. That literally means Baal covenant with Baal is what that means. And so the people covenanted with these foreign gods instead of with Jehovah. So how's God going to react to that? Not impressed. Chapter 9, now Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, went to Shechem to his mother's relatives and said to them and to the whole clan of his mother's family, say in the ears of all the leaders of Shechem, which is better for you, that all 70 sons of Jerubbaal rule over you, or that one rule over you. Remember also that I am your bone and your flesh. So what's Abimelech up to there then?
He wants to be the leader.
Yeah.
He wants to get rid of all the brothers.
Yeah, you don't want a committee. You just need one leader. We don't need an eldership. We just need one elder, one pastor. How about that? And that way, all the problems are dealt with. Okay, rule of one, autocratic leadership. That's what we need. And Abimelech gets the lords of Shechem. He starts sowing seeds in their mind that this might be a better way of dealing with things. Okay, because otherwise we've got to pay bribes to all 70 sons instead of one person. That's probably what they're thinking. So that's how all this carries on, this intrigue and all the rest of it. And when we get down to verse 22, we read, Abimelech ruled over Israel for 3 years. So he got his way, didn't he? And he slaughtered all 70 of the sons, except for Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, Gideon. He was left. He hid himself, and eventually shows himself on top of a mountain and tells a parable, which basically is God speaking that, things are not going to end well for you, Mr. Abimelech. So God sent, verse 23, what? Between Abimelech and the leaders of Shechem.
Evil spirit.
An evil spirit. What did he do? Sent him. Okay, that's important that we see that. And the leaders of Shechem, what did they do as a result? What does it say there? Answers are always in the text. They dealt treacherously. What does that mean? They dealt treacherously with Abimelech.
Ruthless.
Not
Ruth-
in good faith.
Ruthless.
Not in good faith.
Not in good faith, deceitfully. Yeah. Because of the violence that was done to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal, so that it might come upon them, the retribution, their blood be laid on Abimelech, their brother who killed them. Okay. So, and on the men of Shechem who strengthened his hands to kill his brothers. And the leaders of Shechem put men in ambush against Abimelech on the mountaintops, and they robbed all who passed by them along the way. And it was told to Abimelech. So he sees that he's got a problem. And on we go with that story. And eventually we see that Abimelech burns a whole load of people. I mean, it's terrible what happens to Shechem. The people are destroyed. All those that take refuge in the tower, they're all killed. And then he goes on to another place, and he's fixing to do the same thing to those that have fled into the tower for safety there, except a woman who's holding the top stone. You've got two stones, haven't you, that grind together. She's holding one of those stones, and she sees Abimelech down at the gate, and what does she do?
Throws it on his head.
Yeah, she turns him into a crash test dummy. And how did that go for Abimelech?
Not well.
No, don't try wearing a millstone. Not very nice. And so he comes to a bad end. So what's the purpose of the evil spirit in this story, in this account?
Abimelech was not doing what God wanted done,
Hmm.
so God took care of it.
Okay. And how did he take care of it?
That causing problems between him and the others.
But God isn't going to sin in order to do that, is he?
It doesn't say he sinned.
No.
The evil spirit sin.
Yeah. So what's the relationship here between the evil spirit and God? Is the evil spirit an obedient servant in God's heavenly council? More on the heavenly council in a later class. But is the evil spirit an obedient servant to God?
He was here.
He's not a servant. He's not a servant.
He's not a servant.
He's, God knows what the demon wants. And he lets him loose.
Okay. I think I know what you're saying.
He's an unwilling servant.
He's an unwilling servant to do God's
He's
will.
gonna serve God, God's gonna use him,
Yeah.
he just thinks he's getting away with something.
Mhm.
He's getting to do what he wants to do anyway. Okay. He's about causing strife or confusion or whatever term you want to put to it. That's what he wants to do anyway. God is just allowing him to do it, but in a specific situation, nowhere else. Okay. Nowhere else. Can God do that?
Sure, he did it with Job.
Does that make God ambivalent about evil or sin? Because he does in some scholars' minds.
He said to the people of Israel, it's not that you're so good that I'm going to give you this land or whatever. It's that the people you are replacing have been even worse.
Yeah. Their cups are, it's purely the fact that their cup's fixing to overflow.
God
So
can
I'm
do
going to use
anything
you
he
to be
wants
their
do.
judgment. Yeah?
He can do anything he wants to do.
No, he can't.
God can.
No, he can't.
Yes, he can.
What can God not do?
He can't lie, but he doesn't want to.
He's not going to sin, is he? And you're not going to fellowship sin either. But he'll do anything else. But he also is aware, and he doesn't just do this with evil spirits. He does it with kings. Think about Cyrus. Think about Nebuchadnezzar. Think about many others. Okay. He used, who was it? Sennacherib. Who was Sennacherib?
He was
King of Assyria.
Syria.
Was he the one that God sent to Israel, the northern kingdom, to defeat them and carry them into captivity in 722
He was told to come
BC?
at the wall, wasn't he, in their own language? They told him, don't do that, because they can hear you.
Yes. I think I know what you're talking about there.
Does God use these evil spirits and people? Do they have a choice, or? In my eyes, I don't think they have a choice. I think God chooses to use them, and so he uses them for his
Yes.
purpose. I don't think they get to say no to God. for
No.
not doing that.
No, this is what's going on in this situation.
They don't wanna say no. It's what they wanna do. God's
I
allowing
mean,
them
if
to
they're
do
purely
it
able,
for his
then,
purpose.
like you said, they want to cause strife.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
the
but
spirit
God is-
does, the spirit
yes.
does, but that wasn't what you were
Well, it
saying?
was also the kings and
Yeah,
I think if God uses people.
these are situations where he allows evil spirits to be his instruments of judgment. Okay, I think that's the best way I can think of putting it. So they're instruments of God's judgment. And when you get to that stage, okay, like we've just studied in Jeremiah, when God's judgment is going to happen, what can the people do about it?
Nothing.
They've had their opportunities, many of them, as we saw in the 50 chapters plus of Jeremiah. He gave many opportunities. How long did Jeremiah preach for?
40 years.
40 odd plus years. And did they respond to his messages? No. And there came a point in time when God said, okay, I'm done. Now your cup has overflowed. Now will come the judgment. Can people choose to react to the judgment in a way that's better than maybe others did? Yes, they can. And it might have even led some of them to be carried off into captivity rather than destroyed, but we don't know for sure. Okay, but what would be then, God is using Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon to destroy his city, the city that wears his name, the whole of Judah and the people. And I think we saw at the end of Jeremiah 51, how many people went into captivity?
4,600.
Yeah, 4,600 and something. That's not a lot, is it? Out of a population of probably nigh on 2 or 3 million.
The remnant, huh?
That's not many people, is it? So the remnant's a lot smaller than most of us think the remnant is. Take note of that, please. Okay. The remnant is probably way smaller than we like to think it is. Instruments of judgment. So that's what's going on in this situation. Okay. And in these other ones, Judges. What about Saul in 1 Samuel? What did God send to Saul and why?
Evil spirit.
Yeah. He sent it on, I think I've given you scriptures there, 3 different occasions. So I don't know, as he sent the spirit in and left him there. I think maybe the spirit was brought back, and then on another occasion he goes again. But each time that the evil spirit goes into Saul, what happens? What happens to Saul?
He tries to kill David.
Yeah, he acts, how would you describe his actions?
Insane.
Insane. He's not in his right mind, is he?
Out of control.
Out of control, kind of psychotic. I don't know what terms we use, bipolar or whatever. He loses it. Starts throwing a spear at David for no reason. David had been playing a harp, which actually was one of the only ways in that situation that Saul could feel comforted or, at least put to ease because of this troubling spirit that God had given.
Through the sword or his spear in his own son.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What ultimately is the purpose of this evil spirit? What does it lead to?
And he's going to lose the kingdom.
Yeah. God's already told him, I'm taking the kingdom away from you. But he doesn't do it immediately, does he? I mean, Saul stays in control, his reign for quite a few years. I forget how many it is, but it's plenty of time. Why did God send the Spirit ultimately then? What was his purpose?
Don't you think it might have been to let him know that he was going to lose his kingship and that David was going to take over?
Yes.
Put up with him forever.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think outside the box a bit.
It could strengthen David a little bit.
Sorry?
It would strengthen David a little bit.
Yeah, it gives time for some things to come to fruition, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But all this while, when the Spirit was taken away from Saul, as I think it was, between those different occasions, what did Saul then have an opportunity to do? He could still repent. Now, he might still lose the kingship because God would be good to his promise. But he didn't want to destroy Saul, did he? He'd rather that Saul repented. Yes? Do you think God could have worked with that? Sure he would have. But Saul didn't, did he? Saul struggled. And what was Saul's downcoming? He was presumptuous.
Arrogant.
Arrogant. What else? What other words would you use? He was just disobedient to God, wasn't he? Ultimately. Okay. And God wasn't going to put up with that from a king. And what was, Saul was the first king, wasn't he? I think God was looking for a good example for his the first king, huh? And Saul really didn't fit the bill, did he? But
It's probably to break down his credibility, so people would see that there was something better for him.
maybe. So again, God allows a spirit that wants to do that kind of thing anyway, that is evil. He's just letting him go and do it to Saul. He's not letting him to go and take over his family like Jonathan, Mephibosheth, or any of the other members of the family. It's aimed at Saul. Okay. Another occasion, 1 Kings 22. Let's turn there quickly. 1 Kings 22. Ahab. Ahab's king of Israel, and what do we find? Someone read verse 21 to 23.
Finally, the spirit came forward, stood before the Lord, and said, I will entice him. By what means? The Lord asked. I will go out and be a deceiving spirit in the mouths of all his prophets, he said. You will succeed in enticing him, said the Lord. Go and do it. So now the Lord has put a deceiving spirit in the mouths of all these prophets of yours. The Lord has decreed disaster for you.
What does that word decreed mean? You all never had a king, did you? Well, you did, but you snubbed it. The king's decree is what?
I think somebody
That's
said.
what's going on.
It's law. Okay, you don't break the king's decree. Okay, so when Jehovah says he's decreed this disaster for Ahab, the writing's on the wall. Yes, is basically what he's saying. Now it's interesting, isn't it? And again, I think this is an occasion where the Heavenly Council is meeting. More on that later. So Ahab is refusing, the context of this chapter and before, he's refusing to listen to or heed the advice of God's prophets. He sends them to him over and over again. And Micaiah, he puts in prison, and then he calls him out, and Micaiah refuses to give a good account to Ahab. He just tells him what God's told him to tell him. And Ahab just has a hissy fit about the whole thing. And this is where we end up. So God says, who will go, basically? Who will entice Ahab, verse 20, that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? Well, it sounds like there was quite a few that gave an answer. Okay. But then a spirit came forward and stood before Jehovah, saying, I will entice him. That's interesting, isn't it? You get the picture. I will entice him. What does that word mean? Persuade him. Yeah. I'll persuade him, but it doesn't have a good connotation to it, does it? By what means, Jehovah says? How are you going to do it? So the spirit says, I'll go out and will be a lying spirit in the mouth of who? All of Ahab's prophets, not God's prophets. And how do we describe, what label do we attach to Ahab's prophets?
False prophets.
False prophets. And what's a false prophet?
Somebody that lies.
He lies for a living. We call them politicians,
Yeah.
but they call them false prophets. Okay, they lie for a living. And isn't it interesting that he's going to entice the lying prophets with a lie? So, kind of an irony there, isn't there? Big irony. And do they succeed?
Yes. Yes.
The Spirit does. He succeeds. He makes them believe whatever it is. Oh, King Ahab, you go to Ramoth Gilead. We're going to win. We believe we've looked at the hog's liver, and we've done whatever else we need to divine, and we've decided that it's looking good. It's looking good for Ahab. Well, he gets up there, and what happens to him ultimately?
He's shot with an arrow.
Yeah, he's killed, isn't he? So ultimately, this is a judgment thing again. And that lying spirit is an instrument of God's judgment against Ahab. You see that? So that's three different things. What do they all have in common?
The evil spirit was sent.
They're all, the context is all about God's judgment on different situations, different individuals or groups of people. Yeah. So, I want to say something because it's important. None of these evil spirits, I just alluded to question 5, I think, or Daniel listed it. None of these evil spirits should be seen as obedient servants in God's heavenly council. Okay. The same way that Satan showed up in that council at the beginning of Job. He wasn't invited. He didn't have a seat with his name on there. Okay. But he came anyway. And God dealt with that situation. And while Satan was there, what was his purpose? What was he trying to do? What does the text say in Job?
Prove that God was not in control.
Well, he's not omnipotent in the sense that he's just going to destroy all evil as soon as it shows up.
Well, Satan's trying to show himself, God, and everybody else that I'm as strong as you are.
Yeah, he is, isn't he? And by the time we get to the end of the book, he says that Satan enticed me to do this to you, to destroy you, but I wouldn't let him have your life. Okay. So that shows that free will exists, not just in humans, but it's something God has allowed in all of his creation, even for angelic beings and the like. Yeah. And that's an important concept to get a hold of. So God's merely directing these malicious spirits, beings, towards the one to be judged. The spirits were acting of their own free will according to their malignant desires. And that shouldn't surprise us because we're familiar with the story of Joseph and his brothers, aren't we? And what does Genesis 50, verse 20 tell us in regard to that? God had a plan. God had a plan, didn't he? He said, Joseph said to his brothers, you meant evil for me. You meant to get rid of me. But God had another plan. He sent me down here for redemption, to save Israel, because he knew there was a famine coming. Probably because of other evils that maybe Egypt had been involved with, but certainly the nations up in Canaan and around there. So in that sense, God is working, isn't he? Do you see him working redemptively? He's working redemptively when he sent those evil spirits. Okay? And what that says to me is, in light of, do you remember what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 2:8? Turn there. 1 Corinthians 2, verse 8. Because I think this has a bearing as well. I'm going to read from verse 6. Yet among the mature we do impart wisdom, although it's not a wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age who are doomed to pass away. But we, apostles, impart a secret and hidden wisdom of God, which God decreed before the ages for our glory. Now, none of the rulers of this age understood this, for if they had, they would certainly not have crucified the Lord of glory. But as it is written, what no eye has seen, no ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined, what God has prepared for those who love him, these things God has revealed to us through the Holy Spirit. And on he goes there to distinguish what it means to have the Holy Spirit and how the Holy Spirit helps us to understand God's will, okay, through his word. He doesn't zap us, but he gives us understanding. And if we're praying for it, it gives us wisdom so that we can put more detail in that picture I talk about. Yeah. Not just the frame, but the details. How's God showing his love? How's he working his will towards ultimate redemption? So for me, that's really important. But also here, Paul, if you noticed it, says that the crucifixion of Christ was caused by evil powers. Did you see that? Evil powers. Yet Luke, in Acts 2:23, says that the crucifixion was carried out by willing, evil, human hands. Isn't that interesting? So what do we take from that? Is there something wrong with the text? Should we not believe the Bible anymore? Or do we just see that evil and those willing hands are two ways of describing the same situation? Yes? You understand what I'm saying? So, and that's not the only time that happens. I'm kind of persuaded that on another occasion, Paul in 1 Thessalonians 2:18, he attributes his inability to stay in Thessalonica to Satan. Okay, when he got arrested because of that crowd of, I love the term, they were no good individuals. Scoundrels is one term. Yeah, that's a good English word. Scoundrels, out to cause trouble. He attributes it to Satan, but Luke might well be explaining the same situation in Acts 17 when Paul and was it Timothy was with him? They got sent away to Berea, yeah, and they stayed in Berea for a while. And he puts that down to social unrest. So again, the human aspect as opposed to Paul's evil powers. So don't take too big a leap here, but can it be that evil works through people?
Yeah.
It seems like it, doesn't it? Seems like it. It's interesting that we get two sides there. It's not an accident. Okay, we're supposed to make a connection. You're going to say something, I can tell.
Yeah, I think evil spirits can enter people.
Yeah,
I think they do today.
yeah.
You know, I can't remember where it is that tells us to test the spirits.
First John 4:1.
Yeah, we're told to test them.
Mm.
Well, why are we, I mean, how do we test them if we,
Don't even believe in them.
yeah, we need to believe in them and we need to know how to test them.
We don't need to believe in them. We need to believe they exist.
Open, they're lying.
Right.
But you do, I mean, I do, there's times when you see it in people's eyes, you know, they say the eyes are the window of the soul.
Mm. That's
Our
biblical.
eyes reveal a lot about things.
Yeah.
You
As well
see
as
it,
the tongue.
you can see the hope.
What is it, Abraham?
You know, some people say they're afraid of the graveyard.
Some people are afraid of the
They're
graveyard.
Afraid of what the spears are gonna do to them. And I said, hey, don't be afraid of those spears in the yard. They can't do nothing. They're gonna get into the people that you're
Yeah.
gonna run into.
It's only the mushrooms we've got to be afraid of. No, but yeah, I mean, I understand where you're coming from. But does this make sense? Do you have questions about any of this? There are other demonic spirits, and a quarter of an hour to do them all. Anyway, Isaiah 19. Isaiah 19. We've got a couple of passages in Isaiah that are somewhat interesting, and they're going to involve you needing to, as you should with all these scriptures, be brilliant and study them for yourselves and see what you think. And if you've got questions, you're welcome to challenge me with them. I like that. So 1914, Isaiah 19:14, an oracle concerning Egypt. Verse 14, he's going, well, verse 13, he says, the princes of Zoan have become fools, the princes of Memphis are deluded. Those who are the cornerstones of her tribes have made Egypt stagger. The Lord has, my version, the English Standard Version says, mingled within her, what? A spirit of confusion. Interesting.
Mine says a spirit of dizziness.
A spirit of dizziness. Yeah, I mean, that word mingled really in the Hebrew means prepared. He's prepared a spirit of confusion or dizziness. And that probably is because of the fact the word stagger is used in the previous verse there. And they will make Egypt stagger in all its deeds as a drunken man staggers in his vomit. Oh, lovely picture. And there will be nothing for Egypt that head or tail, palm branch or reed may do. They will not be able to make head or tail of what they are doing or achieving. Sound familiar? But this is Egypt he's talking about. Okay? A spirit of confusion. Now, that's not being sent to just one person. That's being sent to all the leaders and princes, it sounds like. So that they just are acting like idiots. Okay? And nothing they put their hand to succeeds. And the reason is because God is judging them. Egypt's being judged, okay, or will be judged. In another passage, well, I've already done Sennacherib. Sennacherib received a spirit in Isaiah 37 that caused him to call off the rest of his expedition against Israel and go back to, was it Judah, actually, I think, and yes, he doesn't go after Judah. He sorted Israel out, which God allowed him to do. But he sends this spirit into Sennacherib that makes him want to go home. Okay, so he goes home, and what happens to him?
Relatives kill him.
His sons assassinate him, I think, is what happens, yeah. So I wonder what the purpose of that was. Well, in case he got a big head about, Israel, he's going to find that he can be subject to judgment in a hurry. Jeremiah 51 verse 1 confirms that Jehovah was going to stir up the spirit of the destroyer against Babylon and the people of Lud-Kamai. Why? Because of their sin. Okay. So what does the spirit of the destroyer, probably clue in the title there, probably. What's he about? He's about destruction. And he's probably got various different ways that he can cause that to happen. Okay. Did God use another spirit in judgment of Egypt during the plagues, the last plague? Was it the same one that took the firstborn of all Egypt? I suspect it was. There are allusions there as well. The Old Testament refers to a number of other demonic beings who are believed to inhabit the world. In Deuteronomy 32, before Moses dies, he gives that, I'm not sure if it's a song, but it's certainly a prescient forecast for Israel, which is not good. And he says in verse 17, Deuteronomy 32:17. Well, I'll read from 15. Jeshurun, which is a term for Israel being blessed. Once Israel was blessed, Jeshurun grew fat, sleek, and kicked. You grew fat, stout, and sleek. Then he forsook God and made him and scoffed at forsook the God who made him and scoffed at the rock of his salvation. They stirred him to jealousy with strange gods, with abominations they provoked him to anger. Look at what they did in verse 17. They will sacrifice to demons that were no gods. And that word there for demons is a different word. It's the word in Hebrew, sedim. Sedim. And to gods that had never known. Gods they had never known. To new gods. Do you have a different word there, anyone?
Gods that recently appeared.
Recently appeared. Interesting. That had come recently, whom your fathers had never dreaded. Huh. That needs unpacking. I haven't got time to go into that right now. Your fathers didn't dread him because I was their God. Yeah. The nations around you dreaded these gods, these demons, but you never did. That's a recent thing because you've whored against, you want to be like the nations around you. Yeah. That's really what he's talking about then. But that term sedim is kind of interesting. It's also a word that shows up in Psalm 106 and verse 37. Psalm 106 verse 37. They sacrifice their sons and their daughters to the demons. It's the word sedim. And it's probably referring to Milcom and Shemosh, the gods of the Ammonites and the Moabites, where they sent their children through the fire.
I wonder what those children thought.
Yeah, indeed. That word Sedim, curiously, the surrounding countries to Israel use the same term, but to describe protective spirits. Protective spirits. I wonder whether the cost for the protection wasn't a lot more than they were really wanting to pay. Their sons and their daughters. That's a heavy price to pay for protection, isn't it? Huh? Along the same lines, Isaiah 34 talks about, in verse 14, probably going to finish with this, two different demons. And the English translations don't really do a very good job with the Hebrew here. This is a judgment against the nations, but he uses Edom as an example. Okay, Edom was to the south of Judah, near the Dead Sea there. And he says it's nobles, verse 12. Well, he says, I'm going to stretch out the line of confusion over it and the plumb line of emptiness. If you think about last week's study, Genesis 1:2 and Jeremiah 4:23, it's interesting that he uses the two same terms in Genesis 1:2 that are described empty and void. Yeah, except the word here in the English Standard Version is confusion or formlessness. It's kind of a chaotic picture, and the view of emptiness. If you look at a world, I said, if you were up in an orbiter, yeah, when the flood happened, what would the world have looked like from orbit?
Everything's covered with
Just
water.
stormy waters. I mean, it would look very different than what it does right now. Yeah, it would look kind of formless and chaotic, wouldn't it? So that kind of makes sense to me. Anyway, reading on. Its nobles, there is no one there to call it a kingdom. All its princes shall be nothing. Thorns shall grow over its strongholds, nettles and thistles in its fortresses. It shall be a haunt of jackals and an abode for, mine says ostriches, but it could be owls. Wild animals shall meet with hyenas. The wild goat shall cry to his fellow. Indeed, there the night bird settles. And I've got lots of numbers on those words because they're not sure about the translation. in the Hebrew is what it says. But the Hebrew words, certainly in Jewish law, folklore, or when you get to the apocryphal writings in the intertestamental period, they seem to take on a lot more shape, if you will. Lilith is the Hebrew word translated in some of your versions, it'll be the word screech owl. In mine, it was night bird. Lilith is a Hebrew word that is very closely attached to the word lilia, which is the Hebrew word for night, darkness, yes? And Lilith was believed to be a prominent figure in Jewish and Near Eastern mythology. The name comes from the Hebrew word lilay, night. Lilith properly denotes a night spectre or some kind of monster. It's said that this monster was actually looked very feminine and deceptive, and would go after children. Even they make allusions to kind of vampire.
In The Chosen, that's what Mary Magdalene was called.
Yes, yes. I thought someone might bring that up. I didn't think it'd be you. Yeah, that's a slightly later tradition.
That's kind of scary, because I know a lady named Lola.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
I wonder what her parents thought of
I
her.
don't know.
They probably had no idea. Probably had no idea. But in Psalm 91:5, we hear about the terror of the night, which may well be alluding to Lilith. And then we also have the goat demons that show up. And I haven't got time to go into it, but Leviticus 17, which is right after Leviticus 16, which is the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, where they had the offering of the two goats. Okay, one goat got offered as the sin sacrifice. The other goat, what was he called?
Scapegoat.
The scapegoat, and his name in Hebrew is Azazel. Okay, and tradition has it that Azazel is a name for a desert demon in the surrounding the nations. Okay, and what was the purpose of the scapegoat?
The sins on him.
Yeah, because the high priest had placed his hand on the goat to transfer all the uncleanness of Israel onto that goat. And then what did they do at the end of the Day of Atonement with that goat? What did they do with it?
They had it loose, didn't they?
They didn't let it loose because it might come back in the camp, and that would be disastrous.
Push it over a cliff.
You've listened to Gerald Payton. I don't believe it might be. I mean, but I think it was escorted way away by a shepherd, okay, into the desert, into the wilderness, and then
That's
he
what
let
I'm
it
saying.
loose because they believed it would fall into the hands of the desert demon with all the uncleanness of Israel. And so I'll leave you with this thought. In Genesis 4:7, what does God say is crouching at Cain's door?
Sin.
Sin. But it's an interesting word in the Hebrew. And perhaps it's an allusion to this very goat demon. Okay. So, I don't know, you've got to do your own research on that. But a lot of Mesopotamian surrounding nations, because don't forget what's the purpose of God's revelation. Why does he put all these things in the context that he puts them in? Because he's trying to evangelize the nations around them, that he wants Israel, his servants, to convert, to proselytize is the big word we use. But when you get to the Apocrypha in that intertestamental period, there's a lot more about Azazel, especially in First Enoch. So unlike its neighbors, Israel's identification with the world of demons is much more limited in scope and reference points in the Old Testament. These demons seem to play only a peripheral role in the war against God and his creation. It is the lesser gods, and one lesser god in particular, that will take center stage in the Old Testament narrative, and that's what we're going to look at next time. Okay, but the accounts we have of demons in the Old Testament certainly preempt and make sense of the later escalation of the role of demons when Jesus arrives on the scene. Any questions? Good. Enjoy your Christmas break. I'll see you back in here in January.